Welcome to today's webinar, SDL Tridion Site 9 Experience Optimization. My name is Christina and I will be your host. With the upcoming release of SDL Tridion Site 9, this is the final webinar in the series of 5 webinars to introduce the new features and concepts and also help you gain the maximum benefits of the new version. Your speakers today are Peter, Principal Developer, and Raymond, Architect for SDL Tridion Site. We expect today's webinar will last about 45 minutes, followed by a Q&A session. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, please pop it into the Q&A box, and we will follow up at the end of the webinar. Now I will pass over to Peter to begin the presentation.
Hi everyone, welcome to this webinar on experience optimization, version 9. It's actually Raymond speaking, and Peter is sitting next to me. And this webinar is the third in a series of all kinds of good stuff that we shared on our work on EXO to make it ready for Site 9 and all the changes that we did in the past year or so to make it quite a bit better than it is today. So today we are doing a duo presentation. So on the left of me, you guys can see it, but really he's sitting here left of me is Peter Kerr, who's indeed the principal developer for EXO at SDL and has worked on EXO since its inception. And I'm very fortunate to have been working alongside him over the past couple of months to do work on EXO. I'm Raymond Kempies, and I'm currently serving as an architect within SDL R&D. And I guess I was asked to help work on EXO because I have done a bit of open heart surgery on Smart Target a couple of years back at TDS. And speaking of which, TDS is coming up in 2 weeks, so if you guys haven't registered yet, please do so, because it's going to be a really, really cool TDS. And that's not all the things that we, sorry, it's going to go there. That's not all that is there in the SDL community. Of course, there is the community.sdlsite.com/sites-events, where you can find the recordings of all these webinars that various people have done in the past couple of months. And it's also the primary entry point if you want to leave feedback or discuss things with people involved in the SDL community. So with that out of the way, let's go back to the agenda. And the agenda for today basically consists of 2 parts. I will be talking a lot, and Peter will be showing a lot. So the first part of this webinar, I will present a bit of context around the changes that we did in the architecture of experience optimization. Talk a bit about where functionality was placed, and talk a lot about how to migrate Fredhopper data into the new EXO, and how compatible the new version will be with the current and previous versions actually of EXO. And to show how easy it all is or has become, we'll do quite a bit of demoing today. So we have basically one big demo consisting of 3 parts. The first part is that Peter will show how to install the new EXO in a clean and pretty fast way, if I may say so. And then he will demonstrate how to migrate data into the new EXO from an existing Fredhopper installation. And after that, Peter will basically demonstrate how to create, edit, and show promotions, as well as a bit into the workings of the query API. And that should basically work the same as it does today. So hopefully that will be the case today as well. After which, indeed, as Christina said, there is time to have discussions or answer questions. So feel free to post any question, and we'll discuss it. So to start with, to start with a bit of context, if we look at how long Smart Target XO has been with us, you can see in this timeline that it's already been with us for about 8 years. And you see in the title that it has had a lot of different names. So XO Smart Target in Tridion, SDL Web, Tridion Sites, SDL Web, and all kinds of different namings. And after all these years, I think we finally managed to settle on one name, which is pretty cool. So when we release Sites 9 and XO with it, it will be called SDL Tridion Experience Optimization 9.0. I do like the abbreviation XO, so I'll just be using that in the remainder of this webinar. And the other thing that you'll notice is that ever since its inception, the Fredhopper system has been used to store all kinds of XO data in. And what we've done basically in the past year and a half is that we've completely replaced Fredhopper with the Elasticsearch 5.5 and 5.6 stack. And that's basically where we hope to end up today and when we release Sites 9. And looking at where we are today, so Smart Target Experience Optimization basically gave capability in Tridion Sites or in Tridion or in SDL Web to give a native editorial interface to do the prescriptive part of personalization using Tridion content and basically personalization rules that you could define in Tridion. And what that would give you was that you would be able to show targeted content fragments in your website basically, and that whole principle or that whole mechanism we basically call trigger-based targeted content offerings. And the other thing that we could do with Smart Target was that there was some capability to do some A/B testing in your website, and that whole feature was called experiments and all the things that are around it. And I think that safe to say that this capability has served Tridion quite well. However, if we look at the current state of technology today and what we actually want to achieve in the future with personalization and Tridion, we felt that it was in need of modernization, and we also wanted to start creating quite a lot of new and exciting features which fall into the realm of personalization, but also in the realm of, for instance, search. And while we were sort of discussing it and designing it, we've also listened a lot to people who have actually used this in the field, and things like let's make deployment and configuration a lot simpler than it is today. That's something that we basically also implemented in the past year to make everyone's life easier, at least for the people who are developing and installing the XO stack within Tridion. At the same time, one important principle is also that Tridion is seen as a best-of-breed player. So the idea was also that we wanted to make sure that we could actually integrate in a bit better way than we can today if we look at the realm of personalization and also search. So that all of this is basically a baseline of basically achieving or having the aspiration, I guess, to come towards a vision of where we would like to be. And I think that where we are today is that we've sort of set a new foundation for experience optimization, after which we can put it on steroids. We are currently designing our personalization vision and expanding that with what we call the adaptive personalization part, whereby a lot more of the personalization rules and the content involving those rules are more automated. So, for instance, being able to use artificial intelligence to calculate which content fragments or content items to show to a certain user based on real-time tracking data, for instance. That is something that is a big next step, and that's something that we've basically made XO ready for to start being implemented. The other big part of this is also that at some point we want to converge XO in such a way that it also can be used in Tridion docs. So basically, since we're now called Tridion DX, and we are basically having one offering of docs and sites, we also want to make sure, or at least enable, that we can use some functionality in sites also in docs, and vice versa, because that gives a lot of scaling advantages. And then besides that, there's a lot of non-functional requirements, whereby we really wanted to make XO more cloud ready and have more scalability options than we had. And another big part is the near real-timeness of all the data that's being processed. So what it means is that whenever I want to save an XO promotion, for instance, or whenever I want to use freshly published content fragments, I want to be able to show that content or changes in promotions or in content in near real time. And as I was mentioning earlier, we've also worked already quite a bit on a search solution for Tridion docs that will come at some point in time also to Tridion sites. And since that platform is also built entirely on Elasticsearch, it's good to basically have this unified storage architecture to have basically one platform where we do all kinds of dynamic indexing and querying. And basically we've made XO a big part of that as well. So in order to get there, we needed to do quite a bit of things. The first thing that we needed to do was replace Fredhopper with Elasticsearch. And there's multiple reasons to have done that. This all started with the fact that Fredhopper was divested from SDL, so that basically put us into a spot where we needed to think about what we were actually going to do with Fredhopper. And while we were rethinking XO, we basically found out that actually we only used 10% of Fredhopper's functionality, and so basically, while Fredhopper in itself is a very good product, and what we actually use from it in XO, we can also basically use that or do that with other platforms. And that discussion led us to investigate on whether Elasticsearch could be the platform, and it turned out to be the case, so that's great. And being able to use Elasticsearch for XO meant that we had a lot of it opened up a plethora of new and nice things that we could do with it. And one of the important things there is that Elasticsearch is very simple to install and configure, as Peter will show later on. But also, having Elasticsearch as a really powerful indexing and querying platform, while being completely open and also open source, we could completely meld it in the way that we wanted to basically use it. So that gives us a big and nice foundation to build all the nice and cool stuff on that I mentioned in the previous slide. So this whole journey that we are almost through, I guess. We have like 4 quite important points to highlight. So in this whole XO project where we replaced Fredhopper with Elasticsearch, the most important thing obviously that we did was change the storage layers. So we had to re-implement basically all the XO boilerplate code to make it work on Elastic, and that's worked out pretty well. At the same time, because everyone who's using XO is now on a Fredhopper stack, so from the start we said, okay, let's build our storage layer on Elastic, but let's ensure that we can have an easy way to migrate Fredhopper data out of Fredhopper and into Elasticsearch in such a way that whenever you connect your current XO installation from Fredhopper to Elasticsearch, there's actually no real difference in what you see and how you use it. So in order to achieve that, we wrote a migration tool to do that for you. Something that Peter will also show later on. The other big thing to ensure was compatibility. So we made sure that on a code level, but also on a functional level, that the Smart Target public and supported APIs are fully backward compatible with the APIs that you know today. And at this time, I can say that that's for like 99% the case, and that there are some documented public API calls which are actually in the public documentation, but we changed like 0.5% of these API calls because no one could ever have used them anyway. So we sort of did take a bit of a step to clean the to clean up the API a little bit, but that doesn't affect any existing backward compatibility in the main APIs. And yeah, the final bit, of course, is about getting the whole new stack released. So we spend a lot of time on automated testing, making sure that we are able to be ready when the Size 9 comes out, that we can release EXO with it. And I think that that's a big achievement as well. So if we then go a bit more in depth into the architectural changes compared from the current EXO stack to the future stack. So if we look at the let's say Web 8.5 architecture, then you see that well, anything in Tridion basically always consists of two parts, right? So we have a CM part and we have a CD part, so the content management part and the content delivery part. And it's always the question on how you get data from the content manager side to the content delivery side. And if we put EXO in the mix, then you see that on the content management side, the communication with Fredhopper on the CM side actually went through the EXO management service in Web 8.5, which basically is an OData API which feeds the EXO UI extension in the Tridion CME to be able to create, save, and update promotions and experiments. And the EXO management service is then responsible to store that data in the right way in Fredhopper. At the same time, if you want to show content fragments based on a promotion, the idea was that you had to, and still have to, by the way, publish out dynamic component presentations. And that part is basically handled by putting some EXO TPPs on your component templates, which if you publish those component presentations out, a special publishing renderer or a templating renderer actually would push out the data to the deployer, where you had a EXO deployer module, which then used a Smart Target web service to store that same data into Fredhopper. And this Smart Target web service was basically built in order to be able to communicate over HTTP and have a communication between the deployer and Fredhopper in sort of a, well, let's say, web service kind of way. It was also possible to use the file system for this, but in all the installations I've seen, the Smart Target web service has always been there because it was quite easy or easier to communicate with Fredhopper in that way. So if we then look on the CD side, we basically use in Web 8.5 the EXO query service, which basically abstracts away Fredhopper from your web application. And the way you would talk to the query service in your web application was by having the either the Smart Target tag libraries or .NET Server controls, or by using the Query Builder API and the query APIs in both .NET and in Java to do your own handmade queries. And basically, this whole architecture hasn't fundamentally changed, apart from one, well, pretty crucial part, of course, and that is that we swapped out Fredhopper for Elasticsearch. And as you can see in this diagram, apart from having replaced Fredhopper, the whole sort of architecture has stayed the same. So we still have a XO UI extension talking to the XO management service, but instead of the XO management service talking to Fredhopper, it now talks to Elasticsearch. We still have the XO TPBs and the XO templating renderer talking to the deployer, which has an XO extension, and that's been basically rebuilt into the new sort of deployer pipeline mechanism that came out, I think, with 8.1 already. And instead of having this separate Smart Target Web Service talking to Fredhopper, that deployer XO extension now talks straight into Elasticsearch. And if we then again move towards the content delivery side, not much has actually changed. So there's still a query service, and that query service now talks to Elasticsearch instead of Fredhopper. The query service is kind of a bit of a Swagger definition as well, which is quite cool. It's very minimal because the only things that it currently does is basically being able to receive your query parameters, and that's pretty much it. But that's all we need, so that's good. And basically in your web application, there is still the possibility to use Java tag libraries, .NET Server controls, or the sort of query builder and query APIs. And the in-process APIs, or code, if you will, are also still supported. And you say, okay, well, what's the big fuss about this? One of the nice things about this is that we have a lot more options with Elasticsearch, because you can run Elasticsearch on a cloud, in a cluster. The scalability options are a lot better, I think. And the other thing is that we only use one logical endpoint for Elasticsearch, whereas in Fredhopper you had the indexing service and the query service. And if anyone has ever worked with Fredhopper, you know that you have to sort of synchronize the index server data with your query server data, which works pretty well if it works. But in this architecture, basically you don't actually have to worry about Elasticsearch, because it's, as I said, one logical endpoint. So any data that you push out from the content management side into Elasticsearch is usually available in near real time on the query side. So I think that's pretty cool. So if we then look a bit more in depth as to where what went. So basically there are 4 big parts that may have changes or not. So if we start with the Smart Target UI, then we can say that the UI hasn't actually changed in this release. So it still uses the XO management service to store data in Elasticsearch instead of Fredhopper, but for the UI that actually has no consequence. At the same time, from a functional point of view, all the item types that you know in XO are still the same. So we still have promotions, experiments, triggers and trigger types, regions and content items, or content fragments, or dynamic component presentations actually enriched with some metadata. On the deployment side, basically there's not much change there either. So if you enrich your dynamic component presentations with the Smart Target data, then the deployer through the XO module will still fish out the XO specific DCPs and will push them into Elasticsearch. The one big change in sort of deployment configuration, if you will, is that we now store all the configuration that you need. So for instance, region configuration, trigger type configuration. We all store that now centrally in one Elasticsearch index. So that sort of prevents you having to go through the hassle to update all your servers with the right configuration XML files. I think that's quite a big win. Looking at Fredhopper itself, because we basically entirely removed Fredhopper, it sort of follows that the business manager is also gone. If you look at what we were doing there and why we would need it, I think it's mainly used for putting attributes live, because Elasticsearch is sort of configured in such a way for XO that it can handle quite a large load. We don't have an actual need anymore to put attributes live or not live. However, we also offered some Fredhopper functionality like search and navigation, which is also not there anymore. So we've there made the decision to respectively drop and deprecate that functionality. Actually, I should say the other way around. Search has been deprecated and navigation has been dropped. Sorry. And I'll go a bit more in depth into that later. And if we look at the querying side of things, basically made the decision, which was already made earlier, I think, but the Query Builder API is the only supported official API. It may be that you've got or found some APIs to basically query Fredhopper with, but in this release we won't support it anymore. But we'll obviously help you to rewrite if you need it your queries to use the official APIs. The server controls and the tag libraries, they should work as is. So basically, if you have those, then you don't need to change anything there. And the final point is that, or bit is that, if you use the official Query Builder API and the new query clients, you can basically query XO queries or perform XO queries in two different ways. So you can use the query service, which acts as an abstraction, but also as a performance splitter to talk to Elasticsearch. But if you want, you can also use what we call the embedded query client to query straight into Elasticsearch. The big difference is that all the querying logic that XO needs is either in the query service or you have it all running into your web app. And if you have it running into your web app, then you will probably take quite a big performance hit for each request that deals with XO. So it really depends on your use case which one you should use. So as I mentioned before, we have a couple of, well, only two actually. We have one deprecated feature, and we have one feature which we have dropped. If we go to the deprecated one, which is Fredhopper search, we decided to deprecate it because we are going to build native search on Elasticsearch in Tridion sites, and we found that if we also want to support the search functionality in XO, then we'd essentially be having to support two different search capabilities. Whereas if you would use the search functionality in XO, you will never be able to search all your Tridion published content. And with the rebuilt search for Tridion sites, of course, you're able to do searches on all your published content, but the search capability is also a lot more advanced than you could do in XO. So this search capability builds, or is in essence 95% the same as the search capability we've already built for Tridion docs. And once you bring it into sites, then that will be completely converged. And then the other feature is which is called navigation. We decided to drop it because in the first place we don't think anyone is using it, and secondly, if we look at what that navigation functionality actually did, we think that there's better ways to actually build the navigation. You don't necessarily need Fredhopper for it. So if any one of you has heard that anyone is actually using this, then we would love to know. So the second point, how would you upgrade? We basically support two different paths. The first one obviously is that you have are in a greenfield scenario where you build out everything all at once and then you simply migrate data. So in a typical scenario like that, you would first set up all the base infrastructure and then upgrade your Tridion databases and then migrate data out of Fredhopper and into Elasticsearch. But we also support what we call the CM first upgrade, whereby you would upgrade your CM completely, but have your CD side still working on, for instance, Web 8.5. That makes the options on the sequencing of your upgrade paths quite a lot easier. So that's something that we support. And there's a big or a small note there that if you are coming from Tridion 2.11, you will need to set up things like the topology manager and the action management service, because I don't think that was there before Web 8.5 or 8.1 even. I'm not sure.
He was introduced in 8.1.
Yeah, in 8.1. So, and then the upgrade steps in itself are relatively straightforward. So what you want to do is first determine how you want to upgrade, and then basically, if we look at the specific XO part, what you do is you install Elasticsearch, you migrate data from Fredhopper into Elasticsearch, which will already give you the capability in your CM to show all the items that are XO, so experiments and promotions and things like regions and trigger types. And then if you're there, then you would need to recompile your web apps using XO against all the new dependencies that we've basically introduced in the Sites 9 release. And we will show a bit in the demo on how that data migration goes. So should be cool. Yeah, and about migrating Fredhopper data. As I said earlier, we wanted to make it real simple to extract all the data that XO needs from Fredhopper into Elasticsearch. So for that, we build a migration tool which does it for you. The one thing here is that it does require you to install or essentially copy-paste one jar file into your instance index in order for us to extract data from Fredhopper in an easy way. And since if you use Smart Target or XO, you already have installed the Smart Target API extension into your Fredhopper index, this basically follows the same principle. So this jar file in Fredhopper should be installed next to the Smart Target API extension. And after you've done that and you've restarted Fredhopper, then you can basically start to do a migration. And the migration to itself is a simple jar file with some Java code in it. And basically you can run the command listed in the bottom of the slide and say, okay, export the data from Fredhopper. What happens then is that data exported is stored on the file system, from which you can then use -import, obviously, to import it into Elasticsearch. And the nice thing about this is that you can do this repeatedly, so that if you want to simply test an export import, or if you want to import data into more than one Elasticsearch instance or cluster, then that's all possible. And Peter will show that in a minute. Yeah, so that's basically where we're at today. This is the context, and this is what we've changed. I think it's good now to show that a bit. So I'm going to hand over to Peter, who will take the mouse and the computer to demo some stuff.
Yeah, thank you.
So I'll click on screen share, and then go here.
Yeah,
and then it's all yours.
Thank you. Shuffling a bit here.
Yeah.
Okay. So, yeah, we did this during the boot camp a couple of weeks ago. We had a bunch of exercises. So basically now what I want to do is go through everything we did then and just show you some of the new things we've built. So the first thing to know, this machine actually has the content manager part of experience optimization installed already, just to save time, because it's just a checkbox in the installer. And it also has Elasticsearch installed already. Although it's really simple to do. Like you just go to elastic.co and you go to the download section and you can download the zip file there, and then that's really it. It's like a copy paste deployment. So after you have this those two things installed, you can then set up Elasticsearch to have the indexes that we need for XO. And we have some scripts on our CD layout. This is a copy of our CD layout. Under content delivery roles, we have XO, and in here we have resources and Elasticsearch. And there is a PS1 file here for PowerShell, and there's a script file for if you're using Unix as well. So I'm currently running my Elasticsearch locally, but obviously you could run it on a different machine. In this case, what we'll do is we will run the install. See, this is not handy, but I increased the font size so you could see what it was, but actually it is not showing it. Anyway, that's.
Do you want to decrease it?
I'll have to decrease the font size here a bit. Let's go with 20. Hopefully it's still readable. Why is it?
Yeah.
Alright, let's make it.
You have a bigger buffer size, I think.
Perfect. No, it doesn't want to expand it.
Maybe.
This did not happen earlier.
Go to layout.
And then, oh geez, that's a lot of buffer.
Yeah.
Alright, let's do like half that. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Now it's really small.
Now it's really small. Alright. Anyway, I can't show it. Alright. But I'm running that script file basically. It messed up the prompt a little bit there, but just run the PS1 file, and the default settings will connect to the Elasticsearch locally on the default port of Elasticsearch, which is 9200, and then it will install a bunch of indexes, and we can take a look at those in here. There are some config files that are used during this. These are all of the different indexes that are created. Those are just needed for XO to work, and then there's some initial configuration and some initial trigger types as well. And if you've seen an XO installation before, you can probably recognize these. These are all of the default trigger types that XO comes with. So you have the audience manager ones, you have some session related ones, some visitor related triggers, and you could have a look here. You could even modify this file to add your own things if you wanted to before running it, so that you have some, let's say, your triggers in there already. Alternatively, after installation, there are also some PowerShell scripts you can use to manage these trigger types, to add and remove stuff if you don't like the default ones, or if you want to add your own ones. So you could edit it here, or you could do it later after the installation. In this case, we just ran it with the default settings. So now it has created all of those indexes that we need for XO to work. That's fairly straightforward. So the next thing we need is actually the management service from XO. And just like with Elasticsearch, it's actually a very simple copy-paste thing. And I have, again, I'll go to the CD layout, and in the XO roles, we have two services here. Start with the management one. You copy it, you put it somewhere on your machine, doesn't actually matter where. And then in here, you will run the PowerShell script to install the service. And in this case, I'll do the auto registration so that it registers itself with the Discover service. I'm sorry, it doesn't actually show it. Ah, there we go. Auto register. This should be familiar to anyone who's installed one of the microservices recently. And it will then, after running this, it will do a little check to see that the service actually started up correctly. Obviously, it takes a little while. Yeah. So then now we have a management service that's running. And similarly, we also need the query service. Now, typically, this would then be on a different machine. But in this case, for the demo purposes, I will just put it next to the management service on the same machine. And again, we'll go to the actual query and the bin.
Are you missing a space?
I'm missing something. Yeah, CD in there. It doesn't want to do it. It's fine. We'll just start from here. Don't really know what I'm doing there. PowerShell is giving me trouble today. So we'll install it and again do the auto register.
Yep.
And again, it takes a little while to start up, but hopefully not too long. And that's basically all you need to do. Now, in this case, it's using all of the default settings, so like I said, it's all running on one machine, but there are actually parameters to change where's the query service supposed to be, where's the discovery service, things like that. These are all just command line parameters to the install scripts that will allow you to point it to the right machine. So now both those services are running, so we should be able to go to the targeting section of our CME and see that there should just be, let's say, an empty list, but no errors, hopefully. So it has, the topology was also set up already because of the previous installation, and we have one instance, and there's just no promotions here, right? And similarly, if we go on the demo website, just the regular one, there's fallback content being shown right now. So basically nothing is being rendered because it's a completely clean installation, but at least now we have something we can work with. So the next thing then would be to have a promotion here that will to test that everything is running. I'll do a simple promotion for the bootcamp publication, any page, and let's say the sidebar region, which we just saw. We will have it always trigger. We'll pick some content to display. In this case, there's a folder for those items. So why not? And that's basically it.
That's handy.
Yeah, someone has already set up these things. And then on the website we should see, oh, sorry, I forgot one critical thing, which is to actually publish the content after I created the Elasticsearch index. So now, right now, there's no items in Elasticsearch. So we'll publish all of these items. It shouldn't take long. Fingers crossed. There we go. So now our new promotion should be showing up in the quote-unquote sidebar region, which is actually in the middle here. It's just a demo page. So you can see the title of the component here, and that's basically it. It's very simple content, but hopefully it gets the point across. So the next thing I want to show, so that was essentially the installation, right? You install the services, and also what has already happened was to include it when you installed the content manager and installing Elasticsearch. Those 4 parts, that's it. Then we're up and running, basically. So next thing I want to show is a migration of data from Fredhopper. To speed things up a little, I've actually already started both the deployment agent, which is needed to actually manage the different instances, And the smart target instance, this is just for when I want to stop it again. I started it. So it's running currently on local host on the default port of Fredhopper, which is 8180. So here we have a Fredhopper installation with some sample promotions here from the previous version. Normally these would not show up, but we have a configuration setting to show them. And you can see here there's some very simple promotions. There's some for each of the regions that we have. Well, at least for some of the regions, the footer, the header, the sidebar, and in this case, they're showing different content from different folders. Some of them have some triggers, like the visitor browser being Chrome. Visitor browser is one of the standard trigger types, even though it's very demo-y. You know, it's most people probably wouldn't show content based on the browser, but it makes for an easy demo here. And one interesting one is there's one that applies to also the child publication, and there's one that filters on a particular field. Sorry, a particular field, but also a trigger. So these are just some example data. You know, customers would have probably hundreds of different promotions, but we have this here to make it a bit easier. So if we now want to migrate, let me show again the CD layout. We have the migration tool in here. I actually have a little text file here on how to run it. That's handy. I forgot I'd done that.
You can just
so
copy paste.
I can just copy paste. Yeah. Was a great boot camp we had, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So first, maybe it makes sense to take a look at this properties file. So this is one of the parameters for running the tool. So there's things like where's the Fredhopper running, what's the universe that you're using, things like that. What is a temp folder that it might use for all of the temporary writing operations, where's Elasticsearch, etc. So this configuration file makes sense to look at, modify, make sure everything is set up to match your environment before you run the tool. Most of these things, like the paths, are probably not need. You probably don't need to modify those, but at least the server stuff. And then it's a simple case of running the migration tool. I wish I had done this. So yeah, that looks better than in PowerShell. So Java jar, run the migration tool, tell it where the config file is, and then the last parameter here is to export all of the data from Fredhopper. So it will go and it will load all of the things that we just saw in Fredhopper and export them to files on disk, so that now I can actually do an import into the now set up Elasticsearch. And as Raymond already mentioned, you could then do this again in another instance and things like that. So that is it. If you have a lot of content, it will probably take longer than that, but in the end, it is a fairly simple process. Now let's have a look here. Now we have imported all of the promotions that were there from Fredhopper.
Woohoo!
Yay!
It worked.
So it did work. The demo guys were smiled on us. So yeah, you can see some of them are disabled and whatnot, but in the end, none of these are invalid, which is good. You might, it's possible that you would see some invalid ones because of what they were in Fredhopper, but that was already the case in the previous version as well. So let's also just see, out of curiosity, yeah. So refreshing the page on the website, you will see immediately that those promotions that we just imported are being displayed also directly on the website. And yeah, I don't actually need to shut down Fredhopper, but I'll do it anyway. It's very
That's the point, right?
it feels good to shut it down. I don't have to use it anymore. Oh, that was too soon. All right, forget I did that. I thought it was done stopping it already. All right, so that was installing it. It was migrating the existing data. So the last thing that I want to show is a bit of you know, how you use the API. And for those of you who have worked with it before, this will be very familiar already. But we have a little bit of time, not much, I see, but a little bit of time so I can show some example queries. So you saw these are using the .NET controls, but I also have a test page that is using the Query Builder API. This one, because I thought we're all techies here, this one outputs JSON, you know, everybody's favorite format.
We all love JSON.
Yeah. So here you will see basically the same thing. I have a Query Builder ESPX, which uses the Query Builder API. Here's creating a new Query Builder, passing in the publication that we're in. This is the bootcamp publication from that page, and the regions in this case right now it's both sidebar and header, and then it's just doing a standard, very standard query. So this would show all of the promotions in sidebar and header that don't have any particular triggers on them, which is also what we're seeing here. So we have the parent-child sidebar promotion, we have a handpicked one, and my header promotion, etc. So that is all fine. So one thing that might be interesting is to actually add a custom trigger, or in this case the keywords trigger. Maybe it's best before I save this to show show what it looks like when it doesn't trigger. So let's say we take our test promotion from before. I think it was this one. And we say we want to only trigger this if the contact that is currently logged into the website is from Amsterdam, right? So if we do this, and I should maybe only do I'll move it up a little bit so that it's first, because all promotions here are fired in order. If I don't have it, let me actually do that first. Oh, Control. Just do it again. If I don't include the trigger, I'll close this now. Don't include the trigger, my promotion will not show up. So the first one is still the parent-child one, even though sidebar promotion is above it. So that was not what I wanted to do. Here, if I now include the trigger on the site, so imagine that a contact is logged in on your site, and now you can read what city he's from as a keyword. If that is then included, then the sidebar promotion triggers, right? So this is the example of including some triggers that would actually be prerequisites for showing a promotion. Then there's a bunch of examples here of how to do search, but I think we're kind of low on time, so I think I would rather see if there are any questions that people have.
Yeah. So thanks, Peter. Good demo.
Okay. Thanks, Peter and Raymond, for presenting today.
I don't see there are any questions. No.
Yeah. If you have any questions, please enter the questions into the Q&A box. We can wait more. It seems there is no question. Okay, if there is no questions, we are going to wrap up today's webinar. If you have any other questions after this webinar, please directly contact our speakers. Thank you for attending our webinar today. We hope it is useful and informative to you. We look forward to seeing you again in one of our future webinars. And please don't forget to take a look in the link and attachment section where you can find more information on the other webinars in this series. Have a great rest of the day. Thank you.